Listen up. April 6th, 2026. Deep inside the contested eastern Ukraine battlespace, we tracked a Russian armored element pushing forward. This heavy armor rolled directly down a lane previously stamped as totally secure. Combat engineers had just swept it clean. Safe markers were down. The surrounding grid was a graveyard, but this exact path was greenlit. The tactical column pushed hard, feeling secure. Then boom, massive detonation. No glorious breakthrough today. No massive offensive, no grand speeches. Just shredded Russian steel burning inside a zone that was supposedly completely locked down. This wasn't just another destroyed tank. This blast exposed a brutal, escalating reality on the ground. On the modern frontline, certainty is dead. So-called cleared routes are lethal traps. Heavy armor means nothing. Nightfall provides zero cover for maneuver. And gentlemen, this nightmare is just getting started. We watched this Russian asset push through a marked safety corridor, only to be blown sky-high by a hidden anti-tank mine. Let's break this down together. That single blast proves that modern explosive clearance operations are failing. The old guarantee of battlefield safety is completely gone. Old-school mechanized doctrine dictates a very rigid protocol for breaching minefields. Combat engineers deploy heavy rollers, line charges, or manual sapper teams to punch through. They drop physical markers to guide the convoy. Field commanders then hammer their armor through that gap to keep the momentum alive. It clears the threat, but more importantly, it builds psychological momentum. A swept corridor should scream total tactical control. It screams to the point man that the vanguard already bled for this dirt and secured the sector. In previous conflicts, an opened route meant strike packages could push hard. The major lethal threats were neutralized, making the risk totally manageable. But the Ukrainian theater does not play by these outdated combat rules. Rapid remining totally shatters the old math. Lethal payloads drop in fast now. Artillery shells them in, remote systems plant them, all without needing a single heavy engineering team on site. Scatterable munitions blanket massive kill zones in minutes. They generate overlapping minefields that are an absolute nightmare to map out. You sweep a lane, and fresh explosives are already seeded before your lead element even shifts into gear. Brutal electronic warfare adds severe new risks. GPS gets jammed instantly. Your digital combat maps? Completely useless against the physical dirt. A route greenlit at dawn is a death trap by noon. A physical marker no longer guarantees your guys are driving through a safe zone. It is just a fleeting snapshot of a violently chaotic battle space. But the real casualty here is psychological. Armored pushes demand reliable routes. Main battle tanks and troop carriers rely entirely on violent speed and sync. Their real power is relentless forward pressure. When a tactical driver spots a cleared marker, he trusts that lane with his life. Once that trust shatters, the panic infects the entire battalion. Crews second-guess the routes. Field officers freeze up before sending in backup. Every single delay gives the enemy time to track, zero in, and brace. That precious offensive tempo, the lifeblood of armor, just bleeds out. A 5-minute halt completely destroys the shock value of an assault. Once that drive dies under heavy incoming fire, you rarely get it back. Tactical confidence is not some theory in a war zone. It is the raw fuel deciding if a platoon strikes hard or cowers in place. This latest strike changes the strategic map. The combat zone isn't static anymore. Obstacles shift, and trenches don't just creep across the mud. Today, unmanned drone fleets and remote strikes redesign the meat grinder continuously. The very dirt you stand on is controlled by low-altitude air superiority. Cheap drones, spot sapper teams, track convoys, and call down brutal artillery strikes. Explosives are no longer dead metal buried in the ground and forgotten. They are active nodes in a deadly surveillance loop. The force with better eyes and faster trigger fingers literally shapes the kill zone in real time. In this meat grinder, route sweeping is a bloody, non-stop fight, never a finished job. For you and me tracking American armor doctrine, this is a massive, terrifying wake-up call. Old doctrine prayed that once combat engineers punched a hole, heavy units could storm it before the enemy even blinked. Listen up. Today's hostile counterstrikes are immediate and entirely invisible. That blast under the Russian armor wasn't just a technical glitch. Intel confirms it represents a brutal shift in how we contest battlespace. Brute force alone no longer buys you security. Total situational awareness against remote threats is now mandatory. And when an asset takes a hit today, the engagement is far from over. In fact, a mobility kill is just the opening phase of a ruthless execution. Once that armor stops dead, Ukrainian strike drones swarm the zone. FPV birds and bomber drones systematically dismantle the target, hunting for weak armor or open hatches. We are not looking at random battlefield chaos here. This is a calculated, repeated execution pattern we are tracking across multiple combat sectors. First, a mine or anti-tank barrier instantly halts the heavy armor, stripping its mobility. The second it stops, a recon bird pushes in, assessing structural damage and scanning for surviving crew members. Next, an FPV asset sweeps in low, impacting the weakest section of the hull. If the target survives the initial blast, a secondary drone drops ordnance straight down an exposed hatch or directly onto critical internal systems. In minutes, a multi-million-dollar machine becomes a burning iron coffin. Let's break down this layered kill chain. We're seeing modern combat executed step by step with lethal purpose. The first strike doesn't need to secure a total kill outright. It simply needs to stop it. In mechanized warfare, mobility equals survival. Once the tracks stop, the clock runs out fast. An Overwatch drone holds position, feeding live telemetry back so strike coordinators can evaluate. The FPV pilot steers the warhead into a highly specific coordinate, bypassing heavy frontal plates. Hitting a structural seam or thin rear armor guarantees catastrophic, rapid failure. When a high-explosive charge drops straight down an open commander hatch, the lethality multiplies. Fire rapidly consumes the sealed compartment, driving massive pressure spikes directly into fuel lines and ammo racks. What looks like minor exterior damage violently detonates into a massive chain reaction. The strict targeting discipline we are tracking is absolute. These drone pilots never engage blind. They hunt for critical vulnerabilities, specifically targeting the turret ring where the main gun mounts. They dive straight for the rear engine deck, where the armor plating is dangerously thin. They scan aggressively for open hatches while panicked crew members desperately try to bail out. They factor in internal magazine layouts before striking. This tactical precision is built on hard intel, never luck. Frontline combat footage reveals attack birds orbiting their targets briefly, confirming the pilot is calculating the absolute perfect strike angle. This lethal focus proves intense, repetitive combat training. When internal systems cook off, the sheer destruction is staggering. Magazine detonations instantly follow the breach, triggering massive secondary explosions just seconds after impact. Searing fire erupts from the blown turret or engine bay, marking the armored asset as a complete, unrecoverable kill. We have confirmed time and again once the ammo burns, salvage operations are impossible. Even if the outer shell survives, the extreme thermal damage makes frontline repairs completely impossible. For tank crews on the ground, the psychological terror is real. Once breached, they lose total control immediately. The strategic fallout from this drone kill chain is undeniable. In past conflicts, you could extract heavily damaged armor and repair it securely off the front. Salvage squads would operate under artillery cover, getting those critical vehicles back into the fight. But in today's war, stranded assets are methodically wiped out before rescue teams even deploy. Hunter-killer drones hold position watching for movement. Any heavy recovery gear moving in becomes the next immediate target. This brutally rewrites how commanders calculate risk. Pushing armor ahead now carries a terrifying new threat. One minor mobility hit guarantees total platform destruction in minutes. There is also a staggering economic disparity driving this war. A standard FPV drone costs under $1,000, while heavy main battle tanks and mobile artillery platforms are worth millions. You and I are watching cheap tech obliterate million-dollar armor. The financial bleed on the enemy is massive. Listen up. Factory output, logistics lines, and replacement speeds now dictate this war just like raw combat skill. You and I track the defense budgets, so we know this brutal attrition rate screams one thing: sustainability. Taking massive hits on the front line, Russian armored units aren't just sitting idle. They adapted fast. but desperate fixes bred entirely new vulnerabilities. We are tracking T-72 and T-80 tanks, bolted with steel cages and heavy mine rollers. These so-called turtle tanks are the ugliest, most visible symbol of battlefield desperation we have seen yet. It shows frontline engineers scrambling under extreme pressure when factory armor simply fails to keep crews alive. Stripped of their faith in factory steel, mechanics are welding crude, heavy metal sheets directly onto hulls and turrets. They are slapping slat armor up top, encasing vulnerable flanks in heavy sheet metal, and bolting on iron grates to absorb brutal anti-tank impacts. The tactical objective is basic survival. Stop those lethal drone strikes and mines hitting from unpredictable vectors. Every piece of scrap follows cold logic. The slat armor forces shape charges to detonate early, stripping the warhead's penetrating power before it breaches. Those thick metal sheets desperately try to deflect incoming kamikaze drones. Up front, they mount the KMT-7 mine roller, dragging it to trigger pressure plates before the tracks ever reach the kill zone. By sparking the blast safely ahead of the treads, crews pray the main hull stays intact. On paper, this rigs together a crude, layered shield of mechanical sweeping and thick passive armor. Every scrap shields a distinct lethal threat. Together, they try to convince terrified tank crews to drive straight into heavily mined kill zones. We are also spotting electromagnetic countermeasures on board, rigged to trick and trigger magnetic mines prematurely. These emitters project a massive magnetic ghost signature forward, fooling smart munitions into blowing up harmlessly before the actual armor ever touches the explosive radius. The tactical intent is keeping the shockwave far from the treads and fragile engine compartments. From an intel perspective, this is a desperate layer of electronic warfare, proving they are scrambling to counter highly advanced minefield grids. But let me be clear, this tech isn't bulletproof. Plenty of warheads ignore magnetic fields entirely. Dumb pressure plates and remote detonated charges will still rip these vehicles to absolute shreds. Now, let's look at the intel together. These armor hacks come with a brutal tactical cost. All that welded scrap adds crushing mass, completely destroying their mobility. A sluggish tank crawls off the line, turns like a brick, and guzzles combat fuel rapidly. Battlefield reaction times plummet, right in the hot zones where speed is literally the only thing keeping you alive. These massive metal barns create giant target silhouettes, while the extreme weight totally shatters suspension components and burns out engines never built for this punishment. These severe physical constraints severely cripple the tank's ability to actually fight and maneuver effectively. We are also tracking massive visual and thermal signature blowback. All that external grating traps hot air directly over the chassis, turning engine and exhaust heat into a blazing beacon for thermal optics during night operations. Out in the open flats with zero cover, these fat, sluggish platforms are sitting ducks for airborne reconnaissance. Surviving a ground blast won't save you when death rains down from the sky. Pushing across the kill zones, they might shrug off a landmine, but they remain totally exposed to relentless hunter-killer drone strikes from above. Ground combat is no longer a purely horizontal fight. The vertical kill chain dominates everything now. Strategically speaking, this armor is blind panic reacting to threats, not a calculated military overhaul. These frontline hacks scream desperation, not progression. Terrified crews are just strapping junk onto obsolete armor instead of rolling out truly modern fighting vehicles. It might keep them breathing for one more mission, but it doesn't solve the absolute slaughter brought on by next-generation smart weapons. For you and me tracking this war, it forces a hard look at modern tactical limits. Listen closely. On the battlefield, armor, speed, and firepower remain a brutal balancing act. We bolted on thicker steel and active countermeasures, but none of that heavy metal stops the most terrifying new threat hitting our front lines. First-person view drones packing RPG-7 warheads and KZ-6-shaped charges are absolutely shredding modern armored warfare right now. We are not talking about massive jets or cruise missiles. These tiny tactical platforms carry just 1 to 2 kilograms of explosives, but they can strike targets 10 kilometers out while feeding high-def, live combat footage straight back to the pilot. Hostile operators wear VR headsets. This feeds them real-time battle intel, making them feel like they are sitting right inside that deadly cockpit. That immersive link delivers razor-sharp handling, split-second course corrections, and lethal reflexes against moving targets. Artillery strikes that once demanded heavy mobile launchers are now executed by a cheap plastic rig pulled from a rucksack. The true terror of this unmanned system is not just its flight range or agility. It is the brutal payload strapped to the frame. A shaped charge like the KZ-6 concentrates its blast into a hyper-velocity jet of molten metal, slicing right through heavy plating instead of scattering energy. RPG-7 warheads work identically. Strapped to a quadcopter, they transform into precision-guided smart munitions flown directly into a tank's weakest spots. Focused armor penetration changes everything. Even our heaviest mechanized infantry vehicles have soft spots begging to be hit. Once that molten copper breaches the crew compartment, fuel ignites. Internal systems melt down, and ammo racks detonate violently. One precise drone strike triggers a catastrophic cook-off, vaporizing the rig. And the way these kamikaze drones hunt makes them even more of a nightmare. They never hit the front grille where our plating is thickest. Instead, they dive bomb straight down. Military engineers built tanks to take hits from the horizon, leaving the roof hatches completely vulnerable to this kind of vertical assault. Enemy pilots also hunt for the rear engine deck, taking out the drivetrain to score a catastrophic mobility kill. In the worst scenarios, they will fly right down an open turret hatch if a desperate crew leaves it cracked during a firefight. These tactical strikes are calculated, proving that frontline combat has fundamentally evolved to exploit our blind spots. Surgical precision beats heavy artillery. Strategically, this massive combat asymmetry is absolutely terrifying. A $500 FPV drone can completely incinerate an advanced main battle tank worth tens of millions of taxpayer dollars in seconds. This lethal blend of cheap tech and pinpoint accuracy is shattering global military budgets. Defense chiefs are scrambling to figure out how to shield our armored columns. We also have to outpace these constant, bleeding equipment losses. Rapid mass production is everything. When the enemy can construct and launch thousands of these killer drones in weeks, sheer swarm numbers dictate the war. Mass volume does not replace advanced tech, but it is devastating when paired with lethal accuracy. You cannot ignore the massive industrial machine driving this warfare. Drone assembly lines are fueling a new wartime economy, built by underground workshops, rogue tech firms, and civilian defense militias. Scavenged parts are rapidly weaponized and upgraded to match frontline demands. Firmware patches enhance tracking, while real battle damage reports instantly alter drone blueprints. This relentless loop of combat testing guarantees a never-ending swarm of fresh killer drones hitting the trenches. This threat never sleeps. It mutates every single day. For those of us tracking combat intel, weaponizing off-the-shelf electronics proves that the brutal realities of modern war have completely erased the line between commercial gear and military hardware. On the ground, this completely destroys our old assumptions about tank survival. Old field manuals said thick, sloped steel kept crews alive. Today, an enemy pilot's flight angle and raw joystick skills are what kill you. Even the heaviest mechanized units have to crawl forward when tiny, hyper-agile explosives can ambush them from angles we used to ignore entirely. The kill zone is three-dimensional now. Lethal strikes drop from above, behind, or right through exhaust vents, never built to take a hit. But listen to me, these drone squads never hunt alone. The real nightmare begins when they sync up with heavy artillery. Listen up. You and I are tracking a brutal new battlefield reality right now. FPV kamikaze drones are slamming into lead vehicles, crippling formations, and calling down hellfire. The primary target is always that first armored vehicle. Kill the point vehicle in a mechanized column, and the entire convoy grinds to a dead halt. With that lead armor smoking, the rest of the convoy is trapped, especially pinned down on narrow dirt roads or active minefields. A massive bottleneck forms in seconds. Panicked drivers freeze, begging command for orders. In those critical seconds of radio silence, absolute chaos bleeds through the ranks. Command cohesion shatters. One precision UAV strike completely derails a massive tactical assault. This drone tactic isn't random, it's a calculated slaughter designed to kill momentum. Traditional mechanized doctrine demands speed, and these armored battalions train to blitz forward as one unbroken fist, stacking heavy firepower and kinetic protection together. But when that point tank burns, Trailing crews face a brutal choice: push through, reverse blind, or bail. Every single option is lethal. Hesitate for just 2 minutes, and the enemy locks in coordinates for the next massive strike. Enemy drone operators are watching this panic live, feeding grid coordinates straight to heavy artillery batteries standing by. They call in fire corrections in real time. The surveillance bird walks the artillery shells directly onto the targets. A single ambush instantly escalates into a brutal, full-scale kill zone. That secondary artillery fire is completely devastating. High explosive shells hammer the stalled convoy, forcing panicked crews to ditch their armor. Secondary FPV drones then hunt down anyone trying to escape. Quadcopters drop incendiary grenades straight into open hatches, guaranteeing those smoking war machines are never recovered. This intense, layered kill chain doesn't rely on just one weapon. It aggressively fuses aerial surveillance, precision strikes, and indirect artillery into one relentless meat grinder. Each tactical element feeds the next, creating a combined battlefield lethality that is absolutely terrifying to witness. Under this brutal assault, old-school mechanized combat doctrine is collapsing. Armored warfare survives on raw momentum. Moving fast minimizes enemy exposure and shatters defensive lines before hostile forces can react. But the second a UAV swarm breaks that charge, heavy armor loses every single tactical advantage it has. A paralyzed tank column instantly becomes a massive shooting gallery. Field commanders who once weaponized speed now sweat over the constant threat of lethal aerial surveillance. Even a flawless tactical assault turns into a bloodbath if the vanguard takes a hit. Absolute tactical paralysis sets in. The convoy halts. Troops scatter for cover, becoming completely exposed out in the open kill zone. Troops might sprint for the tree lines or muddy trenches, but the drone tracks every single footstep. Tank crews staying inside are sitting ducks for secondary strikes, while dismounted squads get shredded by incoming artillery fragmentation. The combat decision loop compresses. Commanders must make instant, life-or-death choices under extreme enemy fire. Let's analyze these brutal armored engagements together. This footage proves how cheap commercial drones are completely annihilating massive tanks that cost millions of dollars to deploy. This lethal combination of drone disruption and heavy artillery marks a terrifying revolution in modern combat. Forget just pushing massed armor. Today's assault forces are weaving deadly drone swarms into every single phase of a ground offensive. The front line is a digital kill web where tactical intel flows at light speed and artillery hits in minutes. For decades, pitch-black night was the ultimate armor for advancing infantry. That cover is dead. High-tech thermal optics and night vision UAVs have completely shredded the shield of darkness. And this radical technological shift has violently rewritten the rules of night ops. Command used to bank on zero visibility. When the sun dropped, you could move assault teams quietly, feeling safe from sniper scopes and recon drones. That assumption gets you killed today. Military thermals expose every heat signature. Roaring tank engines, blazing exhausts, and grinding tracks light up the operator's screen like a massive flare. Even running blacked out at idle RPM, military infrared cuts right through the dark, painting your warm vehicle against the freezing mud. What looks like a pitch-black wasteland to the naked eye is a glowing kill zone on a thermal screen. Dismounted infantry squads face terrifying new night exposure. Think about it, grunts believe the forest canopy hides them, but airborne thermals are locking onto their glowing body heat right through the leaves. I'm tracking thermal spikes right now. Shallow bunkers and thin walls cannot hide body heat. When squads bunch up, their combined thermal bloom paints a massive target for us. Staying hidden isn't impossible out here, but it demands absolute tactical discipline and flawless planning. If you and I follow battlefield tech, the takeaway hits hard. Combat doesn't stop at dusk anymore. It just pivots straight into the thermal spectrum. Nighttime kamikaze drone strikes add a brutal layer to this. Infrared-equipped drones glide in low and completely silent. Those electric motors give troops zero acoustic warning compared to heavy air support. Brutal short-range drone strikes hit in pitch black because the pilot sees a glowing headset feed that naked eyes miss. Armor parked in total darkness gets tracked anyway. A static dugout takes a lethal hit before anyone even hears rotors. The true element of surprise. It used to depend on midnight. Now it requires strict signal blackout and electronic warfare dominance. The psychological trauma on the front line is staggering. 0 safe hours. No safe vectors. Tank crews relying on night ops must accept they are fully exposed from the sky every single second. That relentless exposure breaks morale and forces command to completely overhaul their assault push schedules. Drone swarms rewrite armored warfare. Total aerial visibility rips away the old tactical shield of advancing under the cover of night. Let's review. This isn't the death of the main battle tank, but it exposes a massive tactical shift today. That massive blast on the secure supply route wasn't some random luck. It was a brutal warning. The chaotic aftermath reveals exactly why Russian forces face severe disadvantages across this active front line. First, heavy armor pushed forward with confidence. Then, mobility kill. Within minutes, the kill chain activated. Layered secondary strikes completely wiped out any rescue attempt. You and I are watching this slaughter repeat across open kill zones nightly. The reality is heavy steel cannot hold ground alone. Cheap killer drones compress reaction times and expose flanks, and brutally punish hesitation. Moscow now bleeds massive combat resources just to crawl a few miles up the map. So let's lock in the core battlefield lesson here. Your tactical adaptation must outpace the enemy threat. To keep tracking these brutal front lines and global power shifts, hit subscribe to Military Force. Stay sharp out there. Copy that.